When was the last time you truly felt free? Not when you were on vacation, not when the bills were paid, not when everything finally worked out. I mean that moment when your soul felt alive, when you didn't care what people thought, when you knew deep down that you were meant for something bigger. You see, most people are not in physical prisons, but they're still not free. They wake up every day trapped in invisible chains, chains made of fear, chains made of self-doubt, chains made of other people's opinions. They say things like, once I have more money, then I'll be happy. Once I find the right partner, then I'll feel loved. Once I get that promotion, then I'll feel free. But here's the truth that changed my life. Freedom doesn't come when life changes. Freedom comes when you change. Freedom is not something you wait for. It's something you decide. It's a state of mind. It's a shift in identity. It's when you stop begging life for permission and start acting like you already own it. Because the moment you act like you are already free, life starts rearranging itself to match your new energy. That's what this message is about. Today, I'm not here to motivate you. I'm here to remind you that the power you've been searching for, the peace you've been chasing, the freedom you've been waiting for has been inside you all along. Pause for effect. Let the silence sink in. So today, I invite you. Don't just listen. Feel it. Because by the time this message ends, you won't just understand freedom. You'll remember that you were born free. Let me tell you something I've learned after years of watching people fight for freedom. The hardest prison to escape is the one built inside your own mind. We grow up believing freedom is something out there, something we'll reach once we have more money, more time, more love, more approval. But freedom doesn't live in the future. Freedom begins right here, in the space between your thoughts. When you were a child, you didn't think about what people would say. You laughed when you wanted to laugh, cried when you needed to cry, danced even when there was no music. That was freedom. But as you grew, the world started teaching you to behave, to fit in, to do what's expected. Slowly, you stopped expressing who you are and started editing yourself for approval. That's how the mind builds its cage. Not with walls, but with shoulds, musts, and what ifs. Most people live their entire lives reacting to what's around them instead of creating what's within them. They wait for life to give them permission to feel good. They say, once this happens, then I'll be happy, but that once never comes because happiness, peace, and freedom are not conditions, they're decisions. You can't wait for your circumstances to change before you change how you feel. You have to decide who you are before life agrees with you. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone who lost everything, yet they still smile? Someone who's been through hell but radiates peace. It's not because their life is easy. It's because their mind is free. The world can take your money, your job, your reputation, but it can never take your freedom of choice. That's the last human liberty. The power to decide what something means to you. The power to choose your response. When you begin to understand that, you realize freedom is not a condition, it's a consciousness. It's the way you interpret what happens to you. You can be sitting in traffic and feel trapped, or you can be sitting in the same traffic and use that time to breathe, to think, to plan to grow. The event is the same, but the experience is completely different because one person reacts and another person chooses. Every time you react without awareness, you give your freedom away. You hand over control to fear, to anger, to insecurity. But the moment you stop and choose, you reclaim that freedom, you take the steering wheel back. And the more you practice that, the more unshakable you become. Some people think freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But real freedom is not the absence of discipline. It's the mastery of your mind. If you can't control your thoughts will control you. If you can't command your emotions will command your destiny. Freedom is not running from responsibility. Freedom is taking full ownership of your inner world so that nothing outside of you can control how you feel. There's a moment that changes everything. It's the moment you stop saying, I can't, and start asking, how can I? It's when you realize the voice in your head telling you you're not ready, not enough, not capable. That voice isn't truth. It's fear disguised as logic. And fear always sounds reasonable when you're used to listening to it. But when you start questioning it, when you start challenging those old beliefs, you'll discover they have no foundation at all. You see, your mind believes whatever you tell it most often. If you constantly tell yourself you're stuck, you'll start living that story. If you tell yourself you're free, your brain starts finding proof of it. You literally rewire your brain to seek freedom instead of fear. That's not motivation, that's neurobiology. The mind follows your focus, and your focus creates your freedom. When you wake up in the morning, you have two choices. You can remember who you were yesterday, the same fears, the same limits, the same excuses, or you can remind yourself who you really are, not your job title, not your past, not your mistakes, who you really are, a creator, a force, a soul that was never meant to live small. And when you start acting from that place, life starts to shift. You speak differently, you walk differently. You start noticing opportunities you used to overlook because your energy changes. The world doesn't suddenly become easier, you just become stronger. The things that used to trigger you lose their power. The opinions that used to control you fade into background noise. Because freedom isn't about changing the world, it's about changing the way you see the world. You don't need to wait for permission to feel alive. You don't need the world to agree that you deserve peace. You decide that. And when you decide it deeply enough, Your life begins to rise to meet that decision. So if you want to know where freedom begins, stop looking outside, sit still for a moment, and look within. Right there, behind the noise, behind the stories, behind the fear, there's a quiet knowing, a voice that says, you were born free. And the moment you start living from that truth, the walls you thought were holding you disappear. Because the real prison was never outside you. It was the belief that you were never free to begin with. And the moment you remember that, that's the moment your freedom truly begins. Let me tell you something powerful. Your identity shapes every decision you make, every emotion you feel, every result you get. You don't act according to your goals. You act according to who you believe you are. You can set all the goals in the world, but if your identity doesn't align with them, you'll keep sabotaging your own success. Because at the end of the day, you will always find a way to stay consistent with the person you believe yourself to be. Think about it. Someone who believes they're a smoker will always find a cigarette. Someone who believes they're unhealthy will always try to work out, but never follow through. And someone who believes they're not good enough will find a way to prove themselves right, no matter how much progress they make. It's not that they don't have potential, it's that their identity hasn't upgraded yet. They're trying to change behavior while holding on to an old self-image, and that never works. The moment you shift your identity, everything changes. You don't have to try to change. You just start behaving differently because it feels natural. The goal is not to force a new habit. The goal is to become the kind of person who naturally lives that way. When you act like you're already free, what you're really doing is shifting your identity from victim to creator. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how can I use this? You begin to operate from power, not pain. We're taught from a young age to define ourselves by our past, by what we've done, what we feel have said about us. But the truth is, your past is not your identity, it's your education. Every experience, every setback, every heartbreak was training, not a definition. The problem is, most people never update their identity. They're still living as the person they were 5, 10, 20 years ago, responding to life with old programming that no longer fits who they've become. You're not your past. You're the person deciding what that past means today. And when you change that meaning, your identity starts to evolve. You can't step into freedom while still identifying as the one who's trapped. You can't create abundance while identifying as someone who's always struggling. You can't experience love while identifying as someone who's unworthy. The shift has to happen at the level of being, not doing. So ask yourself, who do I believe I am right now? And is that identity leading me toward freedom or keeping me small? Because identity is either your cage or your key. It will either lock you into your old story or unlock a completely new reality. Every time you say, I am, you're writing a command for your subconscious mind. I am tired. I am broken. I am lost. Those are not just words, they're instructions. Your brain starts looking for ways to make them true. But if you start saying, I am growing, I am capable, I am free, your brain starts finding evidence to match that too. The language you use to describe yourself is the blueprint your life follows. The question is, who are you choosing to be? Not who do you think you can be someday, but who are you right now in this moment? Because identity is not found, it's created. You get to decide it. You can wake up tomorrow and choose to be someone new. The version of you that's free, confident, and unstoppable, that's not a fantasy. That's already inside you waiting for permission to lead. Here's the truth, the mind is loyal to identity. Once you believe you are something, your brain will fight to keep you consistent with it. That's why change feels uncomfortable. It's not because you can't do it. It's because your mind is trying to protect your current identity. It thinks it's keeping you safe, but safety isn't freedom. Growth always requires a little bit of death. The death of who you used to be. You've got to be willing to let that old version of yourself go. The one who hesitated, the one who doubted, the one who played small to fit in. That person got you here, but they can't take you where you're meant to go. You can't live free while carrying the identity of someone who believes they're trapped. You've got to step into the next chapter of who you are, even if you don't fully believe it yet. And here's the magic when you start acting like that version of you, the one who's already free you. Your emotions, your thoughts, your habits start to catch up. You begin to embody it. You start to move differently, speak differently, attract differently. The world begins to respond to your new level of certainty because life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you believe you are. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting for the world to tell you you've earned it. Claim the identity of the person who's already there. Think the thoughts they'd think. Take the actions they'd take. Speak the truth they'd speak, because the moment you align your identity with your freedom, you stop chasing it and start living it. You become free the instant you decide that's who you are. There comes a point in your life when you realize you've spent far too long waiting for permission to live boldly, to speak your truth, to take that risk, to show up as the real you. And when that realization hits, it's almost painful because you start to see all the times you held yourself back, all the times you knew what you wanted but hesitated, not because you weren't ready, but because you were waiting for someone else to say it was okay. From the time we're young, we're taught to look for approval from our parents, our teachers, our bosses, society. We learn it's safer to fit in than to stand out. That, if we play by the rules, will be accepted. But here's the catch. The rules were written to keep you small. The rules were written for comfort, not greatness. And if you want to live free, if you want to live bold, you've got to be willing to break the invisible rule that says you need permission to be yourself. Most people are living on autopilot, waiting for someone to validate their dreams, waiting for a sign, a signal, a perfect moment that says, no, you're ready. But that moment never comes because the universe doesn't hand out permission slips. It waits for conviction. It waits for you to stand up and say, I'm doing this, not because it's safe, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's me. You see, the fear of judgment is one of the greatest prisons people live in. We spend so much of our lives trying not to offend, not to disappoint, not to make waves. And in doing so, we silence our own voice. We trade authenticity for acceptance. We shrink to fit inside other people's comfort zones. But the truth is, no one who ever changed the world did it by asking for permission first. No one who ever broke barriers was waiting for approval. They just decided. They acted as if they already had the right to express who they were. And that energy made them unstoppable. Every time you choose to hold back, you're teaching your mind that your voice doesn't matter. Every time you silence your truth, you reinforce the lie that says you're not enough, and eventually you start to believe it. You start to mistake politeness for weakness, patience for procrastination, and fear for logic. But deep down, you know there's a part of you that's done playing small. There's a part of you that's tired of dimming your light so other people feel comfortable in your presence. That voice inside you that says, I want more, that's not arrogance. That's truth trying to get out. That's the part of you that remembers who you are before the world told you to tone it down. And every time you listen to that voice and act on it, you strengthen your freedom. You start to trust yourself again. You don't need anyone's permission to dream bigger. You don't need validation to change your life. You don't need the world to clap before you move. Because real power isn't given, it's taken. The moment you stop waiting for the world to approve your steps, you become dangerous in the best way possible. You become the kind of person who doesn't need external motivation because you've built internal certainty. I've seen people wait years, decades, for the right moment to act. They say, when I have more experience, I'll start. When I have more money, I'll take that leap. When I feel more confident, I'll speak up. But here's the truth. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes from action. Permission doesn't appear first, courage does. You build belief by doing, not by waiting. You learn by leaping, not by thinking about leaping. And you'll never find freedom by living inside someone else's definition of what's right for you. Because every time you choose safety over authenticity, you give a piece of your power away. Freedom doesn't come from fitting in, it comes from standing out. It comes from saying, I refuse to live another day pretending to be someone I'm not. There will always be people who don't understand you. There will always be people who criticize, doubt, or gossip. That's not your problem. That's their limitation. The only approval you ever truly need is your own. Once you give yourself that the world can't take it away, you've got to stop asking, what will they think? And start asking, what do I think? Because the truth is, most people aren't even thinking about you. They're too busy worrying about how they're being perceived. Everyone's trapped in their own loop of seeking approval. But when you finally step out of that loop, you become the mirror that reminds others they can too. You want to know what real freedom looks like. It's walking into a room and not needing to perform. It's speaking your truth without editing it for comfort. It's living in alignment with what your heart knows, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's misunderstood. Freedom is the courage to be fully seen. So stop waiting. Stop hesitating. Stop overthinking every move you make. The world doesn't need another person hiding behind fear. It needs you to rise unapologetically as you are. Because once you stop asking for permission to live boldly, once you decide to move from conviction instead of fear, you stop playing life on defense and start playing to win. And that's the moment you become unstoppable. So many people spend their entire lives chasing a moment called someday when they have more time. Someday when they're less tired. Someday when the pain goes away, when the fear quiets down, when life finally gives them permission to breathe. But someday isn't real. Someday is a story your mind tells to protect you from the discomfort of now. The truth is, freedom isn't waiting on the other side of your future. It's right here in this moment waiting for you to claim it. Freedom is not an event. It's not something you arrive at after years of struggle, after you've achieved every goal, or when the stars finally align. Freedom is a choice you make, and it's one you have to make every single day. Because every day, life gives you 1,000 opportunities to choose it or lose it. In the way you respond to people, in the way you treat yourself, in the way you think about your challenges. Every decision is a declaration, am I going to live free or am I going to live small? The problem is, we've been conditioned to think freedom is a result of control, that we'll feel free when everything is perfect, when everything goes as planned. But real freedom begins when you realize you can't control everything and you stop trying to. When you stop fighting reality and start flowing with it. You can't control what happens, but you can always control what it means. You can't control what people say, but you can control what you believe about yourself. That's where your power lies, not in domination, but in choice. Some people wake up every morning already defeated by yesterday. They carry the weight of regret, anger, guilt, and fear like a backpack full of stones. And they wonder why they feel so heavy. Freedom isn't adding more things to your life. Sometimes it's letting go. Letting go of the stories that keep you trapped. Letting go of the belief that you're behind. letting go of the expectation that life has to look a certain way before you can feel at peace. Every time you let go of what doesn't serve you, you create space for what does. You can't fill a cup that's already overflowing with noise and negativity. You've got to empty it first. That's what freedom really is. Not a destination, but a discipline. The discipline of releasing, forgiving, and choosing peace when chaos invites you to war. You want to know why freedom feels so far away for most people? Because they confuse motion with progress. They're always busy, running, grinding, chasing, but never actually choosing what matters. They think doing more will make them free, but doing more of what doesn't fulfill you only makes the cage prettier. You're not here to survive your schedule. You're here to live your purpose. When you live free, you stop measuring your worth by how productive you are. You stop waiting for conditions to be perfect. You stop saying, when things slow down, I'll start taking care of myself, because life doesn't slow down. The world doesn't hand you freedom. You create it through conscious decisions, through the courage to say no when everything in you wants to please, through the strength to say yes when fear whispers you're not ready. Freedom is not a mood, it's a mindset. You can be stuck in traffic and still be free. You can be working long hours and still be free. Because freedom isn't about where you are, it's about how you show up where you are. You can walk through the same storm as everyone else, but if your internal world is grounded in choice, the storm can't move you. And here's the secret. The more you practice freedom in the small moments, the easier it becomes in the big ones. The moment you choose gratitude instead of complaint, you're free. The moment you forgive instead of hold on, you're free. The moment you stop reacting to everything that tries to pull you off center, you're free. You're teaching your mind that peace is not something that happens to you, it's something you decide. Every morning you wake up, life hands you a blank page. You can fill it with fear, stress, and excuses, or you can fill it with power, presence, and purpose. You get to choose how you show up. That's the daily practice of freedom, taking back ownership of your energy, your time, and your attention. There will always be challenges. There will always be things that don't go your way. Freedom doesn't mean your life becomes easy. It means your spirit becomes unshakable. It means even when everything seems uncertain, you trust yourself to handle it. You stop waiting for peace and start generating it. You stop waiting for confidence and start embodying it. You stop waiting for the right time and realize this is the time. Freedom is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The more you choose it, the more natural it becomes. And the moment you start treating freedom not as a reward, but as a responsibility, everything in your life begins to shift. You don't find freedom. You practice it. You create it moment by moment with every thought you think, every boundary you honor, every truth you choose to live by. Because freedom isn't something you wait for. It's something you decide right now. Fear is one of the most powerful forces on earth. And yet, most people let it control every decision they make. They think fear is a stop sign when in truth, it's just a signal pointing to where your growth lies. Every breakthrough in your life, every major transformation has one thing in common. It required you to walk straight through fear. Freedom doesn't exist on the other side of comfort. It exists on the other side of courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward, even when fear screams at you to stop. We've been taught to run from fear, to silence it, to avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable. That's like running from your own power. Because fear only shows up when you're on the edge of expansion. It's your mind's way of saying, you're about to grow. The problem is, most people interpret that signal as danger instead of direction. They mistake the energy of growth for a warning to retreat. So they stay where it's safe. They stay where it's predictable. And they call it peace. But deep down, they know it's not peace. It's paralysis. Think about it. Every time you avoided a risk because you were afraid to fail, that was fear running your life. Every time you held back your truth because you didn't want to be judged, that was fear deciding how you showed up. Every time you hesitated to take a chance, not because you weren't ready, but because you were afraid of rejection, that was fear stealing your freedom. And fear is clever. It doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as perfectionism, as procrastination, as endless planning. It convinces you that you're not ready yet. But you don't need to be ready. You need to be real. You need to move while your legs are shaking, because that's when transformation begins. Fear isn't your enemy. It's your unused energy. It's fuel that hasn't been directed yet. You can let it freeze you, or you can let it drive you. The energy that comes from fear is the same energy that creates greatness, passion, art, love, innovation. The difference lies in what you do with it. When you let fear run wild, it turns into anxiety. But when you harness it, it becomes focus, intensity, clarity. The same fire that can burn you can also forge you. The only way to truly free yourself from fear is to face it. Not just intellectually, emotionally, physically, spiritually. You have to step into the thing you've been avoiding, because once you face it, it loses its power. Fear feeds on avoidance. The more you run from it, the bigger it grows in your mind. But when you walk into it, you realize most of what you feared was an illusion, a shadow that disappears when you bring light to it. And here's something most people never understand. Courage doesn't come before you act. It comes after you act. You don't wait for confidence to show up. You create it through motion. The moment you do the thing you were scared of, you feel your power return. You realize that didn't kill me. That didn't break me. That made me stronger. Every time you do that, you build a new identity. Not one based on fear, but on faith. Not on limits, but on possibility. You can't think your way out of fear. You have to move through it. Fear dissolves in the presence of action. It's like fog. When you stand still, it feels thick and heavy. But the moment you start walking, you realize it was never that deep. Most of the time, the thing you were terrified of turns out to be smaller than you imagined, because fear magnifies the unknown. But once you move, the unknown becomes familiar and freedom follows. When you start transforming fear into fuel, something incredible happens. You stop resenting it, you start thanking it, because you realize fear only shows up where something important is on the line. You don't fear the things that don't matter. You fear the things that could change your life. And when you reframe it that way, fear becomes your compass. It points you toward your purpose. If something terrifies you, it's probably connected to your next level. You see, there's a part of you that's always known you were meant for more. And every time you step closer to that truth, fear tries to pull you back. Not because you're weak, because your mind is trying to protect the version of you that's comfortable. But you can't live free and safe at the same time. You've got to decide which matters more, your comfort or your calling. You don't need to get rid of fear. You just need to stop obeying it. Let it ride in the car if it wants, but don't ever let it touch the steering wheel. Let it speak if it must, but don't let it dictate the story. You can coexist with fear and still move forward. That's what real strength looks like. Not pretending you're fearless, but choosing freedom even while fear whispers in your ear. Every great life was built by someone who was terrified but did it anyway. The difference between those who rise and those who stay stuck isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to surrender to it. So when fear shows up, don't resist it. Smile at it. Thank it for showing you where your edge is. Then take one step forward. Because fear loses its power the moment you use it as fuel. Most people spend their lives waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right amount of money, the right confidence, the right sign from the universe. They say, once I get there, I'll start living differently. But life doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to energy. You don't attract freedom by hoping for it. You attract it by embodying it. You've got to live, move, speak, and decide like it's already yours. Because the universe doesn't give to those who wish. It gives to those who claim. When you live like freedom is already yours, you send a signal, not just to the world, but to your own nervous system. You tell your mind, this is who I am now. And your mind begins to follow. That's not magic. That's how the brain works. It aligns with certainty. If you act like you already have the peace, the strength, the abundance, you begin to wire those patterns into your body. You start to create the emotional state that your future self already lives in. You can't wait until the circumstances change to feel free. You have to feel free now to change your circumstances. That's the paradox most people never understand. They think they need proof before they believe, but belief is what creates the proof. It's not see it, then believe it. It's believe it, and then you'll see it. That's not some motivational line. That's physics. Your perception filters your reality. Whatever you expect, you tend to create. So ask yourself, how would I think if I were already free? How would I walk? How would I speak? How would I make decisions if I wasn't afraid of failing, of being judged, of being rejected? Because when you start being that person, not pretending, but truly choosing to live from that place, everything around you starts to shift. People treat you differently. Opportunities begin to show up, your energy changes, and life mirrors that back. Living like it's already yours isn't about faking confidence or ignoring reality. It's about leading your reality instead of following it. It's about showing up as the version of you that already overcame the fear, already did the work, already knows their worth. You start showing up from vision, not from memory. You stop replaying old patterns and start projecting new possibilities. That's how transformation happens, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Every great achievement starts with someone who acted from certainty before the evidence existed. They didn't wait for guarantees. They didn't wait for approval. They made a decision to become the person who deserved the outcome, and then they aligned every action with that decision. When you do that, you stop chasing, you start attracting, because what you're seeking is already seeking you. It's just waiting for you to match its vibration. When you live like freedom is already yours, fear starts to lose its grip, because fear only thrives in uncertainty, but when you're certain about who you are, fear has nowhere to land. Doubt dissolves when identity takes over. That's why I always say identity creates reality. You can't act small and expect a big life. You can't live timid and expect bold results. You've got to carry yourself like the person who already broke through. This isn't about arrogance. It's about alignment. There's a huge difference between pretending you're better than others and knowing you're meant for more. One is ego, the other is purpose. When you live like it's already yours, you're not lying to yourself. You're telling the truth before the world catches up. You're declaring what's possible before it's visible. And yes, there will be days when you'll doubt it. There will be moments when it feels like nothing's working, when the vision feels far away, when people don't believe in you. But that's part of it. That's when you double down on your energy. That's when you remind yourself, I'm not waiting for freedom to show up. I'm living it now. You walk with that conviction even when you don't see the results yet, because faith is not seeing, it's knowing. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You start to realize that freedom was never a place you needed to reach. It was a state you needed to remember. You were born free. You just forgot it under layers of fear, guilt, and expectation. Acting like you're already free is not pretending. It's returning to your original state. It's remembering that nothing outside of you has the power to define your peace unless you give it permission. When you live like it's already yours, you stop chasing validation and start radiating certainty. You stop begging life to give you something and start co-creating it. You stop waiting for opportunities and start embodying the energy that creates them. That's how leaders are born. That's how lives are changed. That's how ordinary people turn impossible dreams into reality, not by waiting, but by being. You can spend your whole life hoping things will change, or you can become the change. You can keep wishing for freedom, or you can step into it right now with every breath, every choice, every word. Because when you finally decide to live like it's already yours, with gratitude, with certainty, with presence, the universe stops testing you and starts responding to you. And that's the moment life starts to rise to meet you.